like the business element. Like we think that business and art are two separate things, but actually we need a lot of business sense to be able to pursue art professionally and kind of run it like a business, right? So could you talk a little bit more about like how you got into doing commissions and how you've made a name for yourself within a certain niche? I know that you started off and you had some like wine commissions too. So could you tell us about like your story of starting with commissions?
Yes, and that's a really good point that you touch on about artists and the business element of it, because one thing that I find doing creative consulting is that sometimes you can be dismissed quite quickly as just someone who visually expresses themselves, when that's not always the case. I feel like people who have their own artistic practice, it's what doesn't get seen is the less glamorous side of the accounting and marketing and analytics and all of that gets wrapped into it. So I have a great deal of respect for all creatives and artists who are working in that capacity and still producing wonderful, innovative work. So when I began, as I mentioned, I did pencil illustration, a lot of pet portraits, and then it evolved into more of the work I was doing from university onwards involved wine, which is part of my practice currently. I also study wine, and one of my next big endeavors, if it's still scheduled in May, is my level 3 WSET exam, which is the Wine Spirit Education Trust qualification internationally. So I'm currently kind of, if I'm not in studio, I'm hitting the books, trying to get all of my vineyards, regions, and all of that down, which is really fun. But that is something that's also really important for artists, is that you can merge these passions and you can start learning about various other fields, because there's an element with realism that you can convey what you want, but also you have to be somewhat true to the world around you. And I remember that when I was in Australia and I was working fitting suits, and a lot of the printmaking I was doing was on fabrics. I was being very experimental, and I realized that during this practice, fitting suits by day, there was all of these different slight rules, whether it was your tie should be a similar width to your lapel. And so that kind of merged into my practice when I was doing these fashion illustrations. I was keeping in mind these little rules, but also, kind of treading on the line of what's not being, well, essentially treading on the line of not being too restricted and still having my artistic license involved in my practice. But yeah, I know I'm going on into a tangent here, but the what I was essentially trying to say is that you have to have a wide breadth of knowledge for creating something visually realistically, whether it's even just how light hits glass different than it hits wood, and having some sort of archive of that so that you can reference it if you want to paint it. So that's essentially, maybe I'm projecting my practice into other people's, but that's a lot of what I do. And I like to learn whatever I'm creating. I like to learn as much as I can around the subject matter, just because I'm interested in it. If I'm going to be spending that much time at the easel, I want to learn about it. So I listen to podcasts of wine, which is why I started into my wine education, is as I was painting this painting of wine, where wine gets poured in from the top part of the canvas, it dances along all of the flavors that are within the wine, and I have this silk in the foreground. And so I was exploring this relationship between silk and wine and how you describe them, whether it's silky, smooth, opulent. And I was creating a color palette that matched kind of the palette, your literal palette of the wine. And that was something that I was really enjoying, learning the podcasts of different red wines at the time, and I think that was what heavily influenced what I'm now currently creating, as I'm also sometimes present on the vineyards, tasting with the producers. So yeah.
Nice. And I think they're all very complementary. So you're very much into wine, you've worked in fashion for a little bit, and you've also worked with a jeweler, right? Like
I
jewelry
have.
design.
Yes.
Yes, so all of these are very complementary, and we can see that through your work, which is really great. And then, like in terms of commission, so is it just like kind of by word of mouth uh, that you're finding it now, or do you find that you go and do some outreach of building your brand nowadays through social media or directly with brands to collaborate? Like, how does that go about?
Yeah, it's a nice realm. I love being in the commission process because you get to hear other people's creative ideas and collaborate in many different realms. I now stick more towards wine, a little bit of portraiture, but less so, more kind of still lives, and they naturally tend to incorporate wine. So I like that you think that my work, my oeuvre is complementary of one another. I feel like it's a bit sporadic, but it's just because those are all of the interests that I'm exploring, including jewelry design, which I still do on a commission basis, but not full time like I used to design for Harriet Kelsall. So yeah, I think it's exploring those and tying them in, and enjoying the whole process of who you get to create for and where the pieces get to hang. So in my commission work, I do a little bit of marketing. I'm on social media, and I interact with the community not for the purpose of work, but just kind of to, well, I don't, one second, I don't necessarily know what I do in terms of promoting. I don't think
Like, do you reach out to people, or do people just find you?
I, I, so it's funny because I'm on social media, not outwardly looking, because at the moment I'm taking on a lot less commissions in order to have more time to produce my own work. And so I'm not actively looking. Fortunately, I'm being approached through social media or through a talk that I'm giving, because I do give talks on wine as well. So someone might be interested. And when, the reason that I'm really interested in wine is because I think of it as an ephemeral art. And I think it's something that's appreciated like art. It's nice to have a conversation around it, be amongst people and get different people's views, whether it's on the wine itself or on a broader topic that's just being spoken to. So I love everything about the creating of wine and the drinking of wine and painting wine. So when I'm giving talks about that, it tends that people have a special bottle that may be of interest, or a moment where they celebrated and had this bottle. I've even painted a commission for a gentleman who proposed with a bottle of wine, and for their 20th anniversary, he wanted a painting because he had kept this bottle as well. So we did this really nice painting for them, to, remark that moment. And yeah, so I think wine is something I love to explore for all of those reasons and for what it represents to people.
Thanks so much for tuning in. We would love to hear your thoughts or questions. Please let us know in the comments and review section, and we'll try to cover it in the next sessions. If you enjoyed this content, please share and subscribe for more episodes. For latest updates, follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Art Focus Exchanges.